The Lewis and Clark expedition essentially became the core of discovery on the north shore of the Falls of the Ohio in Clarksville, Indiana Territory. It was already October 26 when the party of newly recruited Army members, Clark's servant York, Lewis's dog Seaman, and the leaders themselves of the expanding corps started from the Louisville area for the Mississippi River and St. Louis. Co-captains Meriwether Lewis and William Clark needed to make a winter camp in 1803, at least somewhere near the outlet of the Missouri River. William Clark's sister and brother-in-law, Lucy Clark Croghan and William Croghan, built a house outside of Louisville in the 1790s and called it Locust Grove. The Clark Croghans were wealthy slave owners and well connected with the Ohio Valley movers and shakers, plus some notable outsiders like James Monroe, Aaron Burr, and John Audubon. William grew up at nearby Mulberry Hill on a plantation built and run by slaves, including York's parents. When the Corps' expedition was successfully completed, both Clark and Lewis rested up a few weeks at the home of Clark's sister. The Corps stopped, or at least were aware of, the Shawneetown, a community that later became a shipping point for the nearby salt springs like Big Bone Lick. Fort Massac, near a settlement named Pekin, was to be their next provisioning site and possible recruitment hub. The co-captains, though, apparently were disappointed with the volunteer pool there. Still, Lewis and Clark signed on an Indian interpreter, George Dubois, a half-Shawnee, half-French-Canadian trapper, for $25 a month. Dubois was to prove himself an invaluable addition to the expeditioners throughout the journey. Joseph Whitehouse and John Newman also passed muster here. Bad weather greeted the men as they cast off from the fort on November 13. Lewis journaled that he had contracted an ague or fever using the then well-known Dr. Rush's bilious pills, a calomel purgative remedy. Lewis reported a satisfactory conclusion to the episode. Actually, it is believed he had then contracted malaria, a fairly common disease on the frontier at that time. Medicines taken aboard the boats, along with Lewis's own self-taught exercises, managed to keep the company fairly whole and almost free of fatal consequences the whole 2-year journey ahead. With one exception, Sergeant Floyd. Besides malaria, Lewis, with Jefferson's consultation, also sought to preemptively block any spread of smallpox, especially among the Indian populations, by administering an experimental cowpox vaccination. Keeping the vaccine culture alive, however, was not successful. The old Fort Massac, what was left of it after the French and Indian Wars, is located only roughly 30 miles northeast of the mouth of the Ohio River in the Spanish-French scented territory of the mid-Mississippi River. French towns of Kaskaskia and Cahokia and a few other settlements welcomed the party, especially since William Clark was among them. The brother, George Rogers Clark, had captured this area for the Americans during the Revolution against the British. Father Pierre Gibault was pastor of Kaskaskia and the Illinois Mission, including Kaskaskia, St. Genevieve, Prairie du Rocher, Cahokia, and Vincennes. Clark's war expedition in 1778 set up headquarters at Kaskaskia, and the colonel allowed Gibault to continue church services. French Kaskaskia became the first state capital of Illinois in 1818, but when the government moved and the Mississippi River began to swell over the land, Kaskaskia began to decline and eventually disappeared altogether. During a lengthy stay in the area, both co-captains spent many hours learning how to use the sextant and measuring instruments, and began reporting measurements that would continue for the next 2 years. Besides his air gun and musket, Lewis picked up a set of 2 horse pistols from the Schuylkill Arsenal in Philadelphia, where records indicate there were several hundred pairs on hand. These guns were flintlocks designed to be pouched and strung over the back of a horse. The standardized U.S. military pistol of that period was the Model 1799 single-shot flintlock gun, made under contract with North and Cheney of Berlin, Connecticut. Of course, while the West was won, the pistols for dueling purposes were replaced eventually by the infamous 6-shooter. Clark, at one point in the journey west, sold his horseman's pistol for a horse to cross the Rockies. Clark noted in his journal, "I purchased a horse for which I gave my pistol, 100 balls, powder, and a knife." On the return from the Pacific in August 1806, Lewis was accidentally shot in the thigh by one of his own men while hunting. At first he thought he was under attack by Indians. Lewis recorded that he limped back to a pirogue and prepared himself with a pistol, a rifle, and his air gun, being determined, as a retreat was impracticable, to sell my life as dearly as possible. About 9 miles east of St. Louis, a vast series of earthen hills initially got bypassed by the keelboat and pirogues as Lewis and Clark moved to their first winter's destination, a trader's encampment on the Wood River. According to Clark's journal, however, he may or may not have visited the so-called Cahokia Mounds themselves. However, in January, he and some men, while duck hunting, did encounter a nearby Indian fortification, or native mounds, that may have been an extension of the Cahokia earthen structures. Clark reported that he, quote, "went across a prairie to a second bank where I discovered an Indian fortification. This fortress is 9 mounds forming a circle. 2 of them is about 7 foot above the level of the plain on the edge of the first bank and 2 miles from the woods, and about the same distance from the main high land about this place. I found great quantities of earthenware and flints." Cahokia's central mounds comprise a large indigenous encampment on ancient Indian sacred grounds attributed to the so-called prehistoric Mississippian culture. The structures here notably resemble in some respects the Aztec style of establishments common in Mesoamerica, Central America. Although this old place is named after a tribe of the Illinois or Illinois Indian Confederacy, those natives did not arrive in the area until much later, purportedly in the 17th century. On roughly 4,000 acres, there are more than 120 mounds scattered about, representing some degree of cohabiting intentions. This National Historical Landmark today encompasses about half of the original layout and 72 mounds. Monk's Mound, named after some French Trappist Catholic monks living in a settlement nearby, is the largest prehistoric earthen construction in North America, rising 100 feet above the plaza. About 160 steps will get you to the summit. And lo and behold, St. Louis itself peers from the west, about 9 miles from this plateau. An original wooden stockade extended about 2 miles as a social and defensive barrier, protecting sacred and important civil residences and activities. Like Big Bone Lick further up the Ohio and the Cahokia Mounds alongside the middle Mississippi, puzzles in the western wilderness were beginning to be pieced together as Lewis and Clark sailed and trudged into territory previously owned by the Spanish and French.